As the death toll in Lebanon nears 2,800, more than 1 million people have been displaced amid ongoing Israeli aggression. The stakes in the region have reached alarming heights and has drawn in various players, leading to a complex humanitarian crisis that complicates any prospects for peace. With Israel intensifying its military operations, particularly in the Bekaa Valley, and Hezbollah facing significant changes in leadership, the dynamics on the ground are shifting. As calls for a ceasefire grow louder, what other goals might Israel want to achieve? How will Hezbollah respond under its new leadership? And what scenarios might emerge as efforts for a settlement take shape? I'm Karim Hatem and welcome to In Depth.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
الوضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
As war on Lebanon persists, two senior advisors to U.S. President Joe Biden are expected to visit Israel in an attempt to close a deal that would end the war in Lebanon. News outlet Axios have suggested that if Biden's senior advisors Amos Hochstein and Brett McGurk strike a diplomatic deal between Israel and Hezbollah during their visit, it would significantly de-escalate the war in the Middle East. Additionally, Israeli officials reported that Hochstein was waiting for Israeli leaders to decide about whether to move forward with the deal before he traveled to Israel. Now, for more analysis, we are now joined from Beirut by Dr. Iman Shoueikh, a political researcher. Welcome, Dr. Iman. Now, let's start with the visit. Now, what are the objectives of this visit? Two senior advisors, Hochstein and McGurk, and what can we expect?
I'd like to welcome you and all the audience. This visit is the last chance after all the methods to reach out to a settlement for a ceasefire have run out, and especially that Israel is going into its escalation and genocide, and the same scenario of Gaza is repeated now. The US President and the Democratic administration are trying to put this achievement in their record to get more chances of winning and gaining more votes in the US presidential elections in November. In addition, the destruction taking place now has moved the public opinion at the international and Western levels. So I think this is the last visit with the purpose to listen to what Israel has decided, either if they are going to reach a settlement or including the implementation of Resolution 1959, which necessitates the dissolving of militias, including Hezbollah. There are other conditions, including Israel should have the right to violate this agreement. Netanyahu has to accept the minimum level of the mutual points between both parties, and there's an Iranian green light. The Israeli response to Iran and its ballistic missiles at the beginning of this month. This file has not been totally closed, so it's in the good of Iran to conclude this deal, because Iran manages these operations directly in Lebanon, despite we're having a new Secretary General in Hezbollah who is Naim Qassem, but the real decision is in the hands of Iran, and Iran has to decide either if they are going to a settlement in which they accept the implementation of the international resolution and withdrawing Hezbollah behind the Litani area. Hezbollah has also to play another role in the Lebanese equation and in the regional equation. These are the demands of several countries, including the Saudi Arabia, because if Saudi Arabia is involved in reconstruction or settlement, they do not accept to have armies that are not affiliated to the state. So all of these considerations are important, and Iran is now negotiating with the United States in order to achieve its own good first and to have a kind of not control or domination in Lebanon, because this situation is going to be changed, but a kind of relations with Lebanon after the full image appears for these countries and for Israel in the new Middle East that will start appearing after the end of the war and after the genocide.
Okay, let me just stop here and just let me welcome Mr. Faiz Abbas from Nazareth, an expert in Israeli affairs. Welcome, Mr. Faiz, to this broadcast. Now, we were talking about the strategic objectives of the visit behind Hochstein and Magog to Israel. In light of all the escalation, the recent escalation, if we're talking on field and if we're talking diplomatically. Now, how do you think this is the outcome of such a visit is going to impact what's going on in Lebanon and also what's going on in Gaza, specifically because they were talking about de-escalation on both sides?
Good afternoon. The visit of Hochstein comes within the framework of providing advice and support to Israel and not for reaching an agreement with Lebanon. Practically, when Hochstein arrives in the region, he comes first for Israel and for the good of Israel, and to set the Israeli conditions if they are going to reach to a settlement or a ceasefire in the Lebanese front. No more and no less. Hochstein is part of the Israeli government system. He's not a mediator. He's not playing an objective mediation role, but his role is to impose the Israeli-American conditions on Lebanon. Even when he visited Lebanon in his last time, or in his last visit, he said that the ceasefire and the settlement will be done based on the Israeli conditions, not based on negotiations. So the only thing that Hochstein is doing is representing Israel before Lebanon.
Right. I'm sorry, Mr. Abbas. If that's true, then why would he visit Israel right now? What's the purpose of this visit and meeting with Israeli officials?
So the last time he visited Israel, but he hasn't visited Israel in the last few days, but in his last visit to Israel, he met with the Israeli leadership and he agreed on the Israeli conditions for a ceasefire or settlement in Gaza Strip, but he hasn't discussed with the Israeli side the Lebanese demands and Hezbollah demands to reach a settlement. Sir, I'd like to ask you to listen to Hochstein and please focus if he even spoke once for the interests of Lebanon, especially after this war, but he always talks about the Israeli interests and the security of the Israelis and the return of the Israeli displaced people to their homes in the north of Israel. We never heard him talking about targeting civilians in Lebanon. But when Blinken visited Israel during the war in Gaza, I believe that this is similar to what Blinken has done. So I think Biden's administration is part of the problem. They're not playing a mediation role. The U.S. administration
All right.
supports Israel. They're even partners of Israel in their war against Lebanon and Gaza.
All right. Let me go to Dr. Iman. In light of what Mr. Faiz has analyzed and has said about this visit, can you expand a little more about this kind of visit and the outcomes of such a visit in light of what even the newspapers in Israel have been talking about? I'm talking about Haaretz, when it was talking about there are probable clashes between security officials, Israeli security officials, and Benjamin Netanyahu in light of what they actually want from a ceasefire plan or a deal in the coming hours, in the coming days.
So, naturally, as your guest said, the United States of America are supporting the interest of Israel, but they are concerned with their own interest in the first place. So, a few days from the presidential elections and the effect of the ongoing war in the Middle East for a year now on the public opinion of the Americans, money is being paid to Israel for support and aid. All of these money are paid by the taxes of the U.S. citizens, in addition to the economic crisis in the United States that started with the Russia war against Ukraine and the support provided to Ukraine. So, in the good of the Democratic administration and in the good of the Republican administration, to have no wars in the Middle East in which the United States is a direct party in it, especially before October 7th. The United States used to say that there's a kind of peace that the United States has been working on through the Abraham Agreement and making close relations with Saudi Arabia and Israel. All of these things granted Washington more focus on the Chinese file and its war against China and other files, and of course the Russian-Ukrainian war. So, as for this visit, I think it will be a conclusion for the term of office of Joe Biden, who is totally subjugated to Netanyahu. And Netanyahu has obeyed him in having a limited response against Iran. So, he wants to get more of this agreement for the good of the Democratic candidate Kamala Harris. I think this will add more to the record of the Democratic administration that would have been managing to end one of the largest wars in the Middle East. This war, if it's more expanded, it will reach to a regional war that involves many parties, including Yemen and its effect on the Red Sea, Syria and Iraq. All of these considerations are well examined, especially within the Russian opposition of getting into Syria in order to maintain its interests. Based on this, the expected visit will be the conclusion of all the visits that took place before, and it will take the Lebanese response to the Israeli conditions. Most importantly, the implementation of 1701 and 1959. Because Hezbollah is not able to go into such expanded war, especially after the several setbacks. And if Iran agreed to them, we will see kind of a truce or a settlement. Maybe it would be preceding a permanent ceasefire. So I think we're kind of optimistic, because the escalation and the escalated scene and striking Baalbek today and Saida yesterday, and the expanded targeting of the Lebanese territories, destruction and massacres, all of these things are in order to strengthen Israel's conditions in negotiations. So we have to wait for what's going to happen in the upcoming hours. Of course, it's a cautious optimism, but with Netanyahu, there is nothing is taken for sure. But he's the one who's going to decide what happens in Lebanon or in Gaza.
Okay, before we continue our discussion, let's take a look on the details of the potential truce negotiations over the war on Lebanon. Stay with us.
As the war in Lebanon continues, negotiations for ceasefire may have progressed significantly, building on UN Security Council Resolution 1701. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened a limited ministerial meeting to consider both potential settlement and the option of intensifying military operations to apply pressure for the resolution on the Lebanese front. New proposals suggest a 60-day ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, which would include deploying the Lebanese army in the south and enhancing UNIFIL forces with troops from Germany, France, and the UK. Meanwhile, Axios has reported that senior advisors to U.S. President Joe Biden, Brett McGurk, and U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein are traveling to Israel on Thursday to meet with Netanyahu and other senior officials to discuss the ceasefire. Israeli officials have indicated that they will present an official ceasefire proposal, aiming for a deal that both Israeli and American officials believe could be finalized in a matter of weeks. U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller confirmed that full adherence to Resolution 1701 is essential for any diplomatic solution between Israel and Hezbollah. However, Israeli officials have affirmed that military operations will continue until an agreement is reached and will not pause during negotiations.
Now we're analyzing this visit and the full adherence to Resolution 1701 as the State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller has stated that that's what the United States wants. I'm talking to Dr. Iman Shweikh, political researcher, and from Nazareth, Mr. Faiz Abbas, an expert in Israeli affairs. Welcome once again to this broadcast. Now, Mr. Faiz, in light of what the proposals are suggesting, a 60-day ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, which would include the deployment of the Lebanese army in the south and enhancing UNIFIL forces with troops from Germany, France and the UK, how might the internal dynamics in Israel, including the pressures on Netanyahu, if there's any, affect the decision to pursue a settlement such as this in Lebanon?
From a practical point of view, this proposal will, in addition to the enhancement of UNIFIL and deployment of Lebanese forces in the south of Lebanon, the Israeli army will remain in Lebanon to guarantee the full destruction of the military infrastructure of Hezbollah in the south, and that there is no remaining fighter affiliated to Hezbollah in this area, in addition to the Israeli conditions to reach settlement or a truce in Lebanon. By the way, there's a large number of the ministers in Israel are opposing this proposal because they do not want a ceasefire in the Lebanese front and believe that possible to occupy a large area in the south of Lebanon to form a security belt for the Israeli settlements on the borders. So there's a kind of contradiction inside the Israeli government in relation to the ceasefire in the Lebanese borders. However, Israel is trying. The Israeli security and military systems and agencies are saying that they are almost finishing their military tasks, and now it's the role of the political leadership. But does the political leadership of Israel have a strategy regarding what they're going to do in the south of Lebanon, and how can they manage the south of Lebanon? The Israeli government does not have any plan or any strategy in relation to the war against Lebanon and the war against Gaza Strip. Instead, they have just set goals for this war in Gaza, such as ending the authority of Hamas, which has not been achieved yet with Israeli recognition, and Israel's inability to return the hostage with military power. And in Lebanon, the goal of Israel is to return more than 60,000 displaced people to their houses and villages in the Lebanese borders. Up till now, Israel hasn't succeeded in this. So from a practical point of view, Israel lacks any strategic plan regarding these wars. They set goals, but they haven't achieved these goals. So they continue the war either in Gaza Strip, where we see a genocide taking place on a daily basis for the residents in that strip. And the war against Lebanon is continuing. A few moments ago, there was a strike against Baalbek and other places in the depth of Lebanon. I believe that Israel is now conducting a maneuver alongside the US administration. All of them are trying at least to please the voter from Arab and origins and Muslim voters, that they are doing something to reach a ceasefire. So Biden's administration, if they really want a ceasefire in Lebanon or even in Gaza, because they're not concerned with Gaza at all, but in Lebanon, they can do this by just a phone call and a single threat to Benjamin Netanyahu to stop, by stopping the supply of the bombs that are equal to 1 ton of the explosives. However, the United States is concerned with the continuation of this war as it is now.
Right.
But they just do not seek further expansion. They want to keep the tension between Israel and Iran and the Iranian threat to respond to the Israeli strike. Hence, the United States are the partners. They're not just the protectors. They are the partners to Israel in their war against Lebanon or Gaza or even against Iran.
Dr. Iman, now Naim Qassem is expected to deliver his first address as the new leader of Hezbollah. What do you think is going to be in his address, in light also of the statements made by the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant that the leadership or the new leadership of Hezbollah is only temporary?
As for the speech of Naim Qassem, the new Secretary General of Hezbollah, I believe that his speech is not very much of realistic speech. He was just addressing the emotions. It was just popular. He was trying to reiterate the fact that Hezbollah has restored its lines and they have the power and the capability and all of these things. All of these things were expected because it's the first speech for him after being the new Secretary General of the party. He also discussed the Israeli provocations, and if Hezbollah hasn't opened the front of support, Israel would have launched this war. These justifications are usually said by Hezbollah in order to justify their operations against Israel. No one justifies the actions of Israel, but opening the support front opened the doors for war against Lebanon, and now Lebanon is under the fire of Israel. All the villages are destroyed, and now Baalbek governorate, which is one of the largest governorates in Lebanon, is being destroyed after being evacuated from its residents. And what Yoav Gallant said, that Qassem is temporary, has two meanings. First of all, he may be on the list of targeting, so he will end up like the previous leaders who were assassinated by Israel, especially the one who was elected to be the successor of Nasrallah, the CEO of Hezbollah, who is Hashim Safieddin, a relative to Hassan Nasrallah. He has been assassinated, and they waited for 3 weeks to announce the success of the assassination in the southern suburbs. This is what Gallant means, which is that Qassem will have the same destiny. The other meaning that Israel knows that the upcoming period, Hezbollah will not play a major military role, especially after the formation of government and the election of the president of a state in Lebanon, and after the change of the political regime. So the Lebanese army forces will be deployed on the borders for more than 2,000 and a half, as agreed in the Paris conference, in addition to UNIFIL. Maybe what Galant wants to say that all of these things are nominal. The appointment of Qasem is nominal. It will not change the equation. It will not change the path of the military operation. That even if Hezbollah is a winner in the ground operations, and when he said that we are waiting for your entrance to fight with you, but Israel placed the failure in the ground operation with airstrikes that covered most of Lebanon, and on daily basis there are tens of martyrs. Hence, I believe today that...
Thank you very much. That was from Beirut, Dr. Iman Shoueikh, a political researcher, and from Nazareth, Mr. Faiz Abbas, an expert in Israeli affairs. Thank you very much, both of you, for your insights. Now that brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Stay tuned for more on Q News.